In the shadowed recesses of ancient Mesopotamian belief, where gods ruled the heavens and demons lurked in the darkness, there existed a force more terrifying than any mortal could comprehend. A force that defied even the will of the gods themselves. Her name was Lamashtu, the bringer of nightmares, the devourer of infants, the embodiment of suffering. Unlike the countless spirits and demons that served the gods as mere instruments of punishment, Lamashtu acted of her own will, driven by an insatiable hunger for destruction. She was not sent by the divine to punish wrongdoers. She was chaos incarnate, an unrelenting horror whose sole purpose was to torment the living. To the people of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, and Babylon, she was not just a tale told to frighten children. She was a waking nightmare, a relentless predator that no mother, no child, and no home could ever be truly safe from. The mere mention of her name was enough to send shivers down the spines of those who dared speak it. To the ancient Mesopotamians, she was the ultimate horror, a monster that threatened not only the body but the very future of humanity itself. And so, they fought to keep her away, invoking the protection of powerful spirits, carving protective amulets, and whispering desperate prayers in the dead of night. But even as they did, they knew one thing for certain. Lamashtu could never truly be banished. She was eternal, waiting just beyond the veil of darkness, ready to strike once more. In the pantheon of Mesopotamian mythology, where gods governed the cosmos and demons carried out their will, one entity stood apart, a being neither fully divine nor fully demonic, but something far more terrifying. Lamashtu, a name whispered in fear across the lands of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, was not an ordinary spirit or a mere servant of the gods. She was a force unto herself, a renegade of darkness, acting outside the control of even the most powerful deities. Unlike many malevolent spirits that plagued humankind under the command of greater gods, Lamashtu was not bound by any celestial authority. She was said to be the daughter of Anu, the great sky god, a being born of divine essence. Yet, where her celestial kin shaped the world, maintained order, and presided over fate, Lamashtu rejected creation and order entirely, choosing instead to revel in destruction and suffering. She was a being of chaos, an entity whose cruelty was not punishment for wrongdoing, but an unquenchable thirst for misery. Even the gods feared her insatiable hunger for pain, for she did not discriminate between the righteous and the wicked. Her wrath fell upon all. Her very appearance was a warning, a nightmarish blend of human, beast, and monster, a grotesque form that reflected the horrors she inflicted upon the world. She bore the head of a ferocious lioness, her sharp fangs forever bared in a snarl, ready to tear into the flesh of her helpless victims. Her body, though vaguely human in shape, was monstrous, grotesque and misshapen, covered in reptilian scales that gleamed like armor in the darkness. Her arms ended in long, talon-like claws, sharp as daggers, with which she reached for infants in their cradles. Instead of human feet, she possessed the deadly talons of a bird of prey, curved and razor-sharp, allowing her to move swiftly and strike without warning. She was often depicted clutching writhing serpents in her hands, creatures that symbolized disease and poison, reinforcing her dominion over sickness, madness, and death. It was said that with a mere touch, she could infect a mother's womb, steal the breath of a newborn, or bring fever upon the innocent. In some depictions, she was seen riding a donkey, an unsettling sight, as this humble beast, often associated with burden and hardship, became the very mount of doom beneath the weight of the demoness. Each grotesque feature of Lamashtu served as a reminder of her horrifying nature, her form an amalgamation of the most feared creatures of the ancient world. She was not merely a demon, but a monstrous entity of divine lineage, a goddess turned nightmare who thrived on the anguish of humankind. Unlike the spirits that haunted the night under the command of greater gods, she answered to no one. She was chaos incarnate, a predator of the innocent, a force that could never truly be banished. Lamashtu was no mindless specter haunting the night. She was a relentless predator, choosing her victims with calculated cruelty. Unlike spirits that tormented the wicked, she preyed upon the innocent, striking at the heart of human survival. Her primary targets were those most vulnerable: pregnant women, newborn babies, and young children. No home was safe from her presence, no family spared her wrath. Under the cover of darkness, she would slip silently into homes, her monstrous shadow creeping across the walls, unseen but deeply felt. Mothers who slept too deeply would awaken to an empty cradle, their child stolen away by an unseen force. Others would find their babies cold and lifeless, their breath stolen in the night. Lamashtu was said to strangle infants as they slept, her taloned hands closing around their tiny throats, silencing their cries forever. Those unfortunates enough to survive her grasp risked an even worse fate, for she was believed to drink the blood of newborns, consuming their life force to sustain her own unholy existence. But her hunger did not stop with blood alone. She would suck the marrow from the bones of the weak, draining the very essence of life from her victims. The sight of a sickly child wasting away, their body growing thinner with each passing night, was said to be the mark of Lamashtu's presence. It was not merely disease that claimed them, but her insatiable need to feast upon their innocence. Expectant mothers feared her just as much as infants did, for Lamashtu's cruelty extended to the womb itself. She was said to cause miscarriages and stillbirths, reaching into the unseen world to rob mothers of the children they had yet to hold. Women who carried life within them lived in constant dread, knowing that their unborn child could be taken at any moment. Some believed she whispered into the ears of pregnant women as they slept, filling their dreams with darkness and despair, poisoning their bodies with unseen sickness. Yet Lamashtu's malice was not limited to mothers and children alone. She was the bringer of disease and madness, a force of chaos that spread suffering wherever she roamed. She was blamed for fevers that ravaged entire villages, for poisoned water that left families writhing in agony, and for plagues that swept through the land with no cure in sight. She did not simply kill, she tormented, she withered, she brought despair. Even the mind was not safe from her touch. It was believed that she could creep into dreams, twisting them into horrific nightmares that left men and women screaming in the night, their sanity unraveling thread by thread. Those who fell under her influence were often found mumbling to themselves, their eyes hollow, their minds lost to an unseen terror. To the people of Mesopotamia, Lamashtu was not just a demon. She was a living nightmare, a presence that could not be reasoned with or bargained away. She existed to spread misery, to steal, to devour, and to destroy. Every stillbirth, every sudden illness, every unexplained madness bore her mark. And no matter how many prayers were whispered, no matter how many offerings were made, her hunger was never satisfied. With such a monstrous force lurking in the shadows, the people of ancient Mesopotamia lived in constant fear. Every mother who carried a child, every father who watched over his newborn, and every family that had seen sickness steal away their loved ones knew that Lamashtu's hunger was endless. But humans were not defenseless. They sought ways to protect themselves, turning to powerful rituals, sacred symbols, and a surprising ally, Pazuzu, the demon king of the wind. Pazuzu was a terrifying figure in his own right, a monstrous being with a snarling dog-like face, bulging eyes, the body of a man, taloned hands, and massive wings. He was a demon, but unlike Lamashtu, he did not exist solely to bring suffering. He was also her greatest adversary. It was believed that Pazuzu's strength could drive Lamashtu away, forcing her to retreat back into the darkness from which she came. Though he was feared, people were willing to invoke his name, for only he had the power to stand against the demoness. To guard against Lamashtu's wrath, people placed amulets of Pazuzu in their homes and around the necks of pregnant women. These small, intricately carved charms bore his fearsome image, a reminder that one horror could be used to fight another. Women who feared miscarriage clutched the amulets as they slept, whispering prayers that Pazuzu's presence would keep the demoness at bay. But physical protection was not enough. Priests recited sacred incantations written on clay tablets, their voices rising in solemn chants meant to banish Lamashtu from the mortal world. These spells were inscribed in cuneiform, calling upon the gods and spirits to stand against her. Families who could afford it commissioned these tablets to be placed in their homes, believing that the written word itself carried power strong enough to repel the demoness. Rituals were also performed in desperate attempts to appease the gods and seek their divine protection. Offerings of food and drink were left at temple altars, pleading for mercy. Some believed that fire could purify and drive away evil, so they burned herbs, letting the smoke rise toward the heavens, hoping it would form a barrier against Lamashtu's approach. Yet, it was Pazuzu's name that was spoken in hushed, urgent prayers whenever a mother felt a shadow pass too close. The people believed that merely invoking him would send Lamashtu into hiding, for she feared his wrath above all else. Even though Pazuzu himself was a demon, he was a necessary evil, one that stood between humanity and the nightmare that sought to devour them. Still, the people of Mesopotamia knew that no defense was absolute. Lamashtu was relentless, her hunger insatiable. The battle against her was never-ending, and for every mother who clutched a Pazuzu amulet in trembling hands, there was another who had already lost everything to the demoness in the night. The terror of Lamashtu was not merely whispered in the fearful hearts of the people. It was etched into stone, pressed into clay, and inscribed onto protective charms meant to hold back the darkness. Her name appeared in numerous Mesopotamian tablets and inscriptions, a testament to the deep and lingering dread she inspired. From the temples of Akkad to the palaces of Babylon, her legend endured, her wicked deeds recorded in solemn warnings meant to guide the living. Some of the most chilling texts describe her in vivid, nightmarish detail, painting a picture of a relentless predator. She who comes at night like a raging storm, she who devours the flesh of children, she who drinks the blood of the innocent, may she be cast into the abyss where no light dwells. These desperate pleas were not merely poetic verses, they were incantations of survival, prayers uttered in the hope that the gods might hear and spare the helpless from Lamashtu's hunger. Clay tablets bearing similar inscriptions were placed in homes, near cribs, or carried by expectant mothers, as if the weight of the written word could shield them from her grasp. Protective amulets depicting Lamashtu were also crafted, not as an honor to her, but as a form of sympathetic magic. If her image could be contained, perhaps her influence could be controlled. These amulets often showed her with her terrifying features, the head of a lioness, the talons of a bird, her monstrous hands gripping writhing snakes. But just as often, alongside her image, the figure of Pazuzu was inscribed, his presence a warning that her reign of terror could be challenged. Lamashtu's presence in Mesopotamian writings was not just a recounting of myth, but a reflection of the deep anxieties of the people. Infant mortality was high, diseases spread unchecked, and miscarriages were a grim reality of life. When death came suddenly and without explanation, it was Lamashtu who was blamed. She was not just a legend, she was an ever-present force, lurking in the shadows of every home, waiting to claim another victim. Though the great cities of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon eventually crumbled, their stories did not. The legend of Lamashtu endured, carried through the centuries, adapting, evolving, and taking new forms in different cultures. She did not fade into obscurity, instead she slithered into the dark corners of mythology worldwide, inspiring new horrors. In Babylonian and Assyrian mythology, she evolved beyond her original form. She became more than a bringer of disease and death. She became a night-stalking entity, a spectral force of evil that preyed upon the weak in the dead of night. Her insatiable thirst for blood, her obsession with newborns, and her ability to slip unseen into homes mirrored traits found in later vampire legends. Some scholars believe that Lamashtu's myth contributed to one of the most feared figures in Jewish folklore, Lilith. Like Lamashtu, Lilith was said to be a demoness who preyed on infants, stealing them from their cradles and draining their life essence. Lilith, too, was depicted as a winged being, a creature of the night, a nightmare given form. Whether directly inspired or simply born from the same primal fear, the similarities between Lamashtu and Lilith are undeniable. But her influence did not stop there. Her monstrous characteristics, sharp claws, a hunger for children, and a presence that brought death and disease, can be seen in medieval European tales of witches. The image of the old crone who kidnaps children, the lurking hag who sucks the breath from infants, the eerie spirit that causes nightmares, all echo Lamashtu's ancient legend. Even in modern horror, elements of her myth persist. The demonic mother, the child-stealing phantom, the nocturnal entity that creeps into bedrooms at night, these are all shadows cast by Lamashtu, a being so feared that her story refused to be forgotten. And so, though thousands of years have passed since her name was first carved into stone, Lamashtu remains. In whispers, in nightmares, in the unseen fears that linger in the dark, she endures, waiting, as she always has, for the moment to strike once more. Even today, the legend of Lamashtu continues to haunt those who read about her. She is a reminder of ancient fears, of the darkness that lurks beyond the firelight, of the things that come for the helpless in the night. Her story remains etched in history, whispered in ancient texts, and echoed in the fears of humanity. A demon that may have been born in the distant past, but whose shadow still lingers in the nightmares of the present.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.